So, I just got finished reading Andre Gide, Autumn Leaves, which is actually a collection of his essays rather than one of his actual novels, like The Immortalist, I think. It's one of them, which I'd like to read, obviously. I like to read all of his stuff. But I started with this because I was like, I had heard of Gide before, vaguely. I was like, okay, was he kind of a modern writer, I suppose, kind of probably big in the early 19th century, up until, he lived until, I believe, the 50s, I think. I want to say he was born in 1869, so, I did, actually, I was pleasantly surprised that this book of essays, and I couldn't find a release date on it, like when it was, I'm assuming it was probably later on in life when other people compiled stuff that he'd just written kind of, possibly, I guess, post 1930s, I suppose, and compiled it into a compendium of essays. But I was actually kind of refreshed to hear kind of a total life story in some sense, because I got from it that Gide was born in France, and I don't know if it was the Normandy part of it, because he compares that to Gide Maupassant, I think, where he was born, and he says that he was elected mayor of this small town because of a friend of his, and his friend had a kind of a funny name, I can't remember, but I thought it was funny because it almost sounded something out of a story, but it actually happened, that Gide was kind of short stint in politics in his youth when he was in his mid-20s, I think, and was elected mayor of this little town, farm town in France, and it was kind of disastrous because he won a landslide election, I think, because this friend of his, I'm not sure if he would have called him a friend after he found out what happened, but he ended up like cheating the numbers and like using all kinds of, I think, bribery and all sorts of other kind of unethical methods for getting him, exposure and elected into office. And I think after that he like swore he'd never do that again, and he took up writing and did really good for himself. And a lot of these different essays, he has to do a lot with his great kind of idols. He has a good amount of admiration for Goethe, for example, and he's like, even though I'm French and I can't really quite understand, he's trying to find the translations of Goethe, but he was like commending him for, as being like one of the greatest writers, and deserving the status he has as being one of the greatest, not only literary figures, polymaths too. Like he wrote like a book on color, I think, like a theory on colors, and I think he, kind of worked closely with Arthur Schopenhauer on different kind of, his theories, like, I think like certain things on ethics or certain things with the will, I think. But yeah, he wasn't, he kind of spread his horizons. He was in politics too. So I think that's what, he has a great love of Goethe for not only just the writing, when it comes down to the, Faust, when it comes down to that and that, the magnitude of that story alone, or, when it comes to, but when it comes down to the personality, of him. So that's, he, he didn't think that much of romanticism too, Goethe. But I think Andre Gide had a great love of other literature. He mentions, I think, Stendhal in there. I think he's, but he also mentions his that he met Joseph Conrad as well, who is a famous Polish slash emigrated over to Britain, so he's known as a Polish-British writer, and he lived most of his days in, I think, England, and I don't know if it's Kent side or what exactly area of it was, but I think Gide ended up traveling up there one day, and ended up bumping into him kind of by happenstance, and he like talked about his love of like Lord Jim, or there's one that he says, like, I can't say it because it's like but the Narcissus, the one about Narcissus, you'll understand if you look it up, Joseph Conrad, and but I just want to kind of catch myself there before I say something I regret. But yeah, he talks a lot about. It's kind of true in like some sense. Like somebody said something about how some writers have crushes on other writers. You develop like a great adoration of, let's say, you know, Mozart even, like, and you end up kind of like imitating some of what they do, or like wanting to like know more about them, like how they what makes them tick, or what makes them how their brain pick their brain really. And that's kind of what happens here with a lot of these different writers that he and not just Joseph Conrad, but André Gide also had a long-standing relationship with Paul Verlaine, who is a famous French poet. I think I've got to read some of his stuff actually, and I keep mixing him with Paul Valéry, who is another kind of around that same time French artist, intellectual, kind of putting his hands in all sorts of different kind of endeavors. And yeah, he talks about he had a good friendship with him, and he was like horrified when he like stricken with grief when he died, because he had like a 50 long, I think, year friendship with Verlaine, and he just like had a lot of nice things to say, but he also didn't try to also be truthful about his message, be like, there's certain things he did I didn't agree with, or politically, or this or that. One such thing was a big heated thing was the delving into history here inevitably, is the Alfred Dreyfus affair of the early 1900s. I think it was 1900 on the dot. I think I could be wrong, but it was like that was a big thing for like a lot of French people. Like it was like a big thing about anti-Semitism, the fact that the reason he was tried and for kind of different things, or like the reason why his trial went, and I think it was like something because he was in the military, was like involved court-martialship, so it was like a lot more dishonorable, this position, in the fact that there was a clear anti-Semitic like strain that these people had, that the judges had, that when they voted against his favor and as guilty, and of something that he clearly didn't do, because the evidence, it was found out, like, not even after the fact, but, post hoc, but, like right there, like it was found out that the evidence, I think, this is my kind of rusty understanding of it, but yeah, that was something that, that set people that kind of like had echoed throughout history, not just in France, but also to other places. Then, this meaning of like honor, or like bias, partiality, showing, favoritism, anti-Semitism, obviously, too, which is a very heated topic of its own. And I think, obviously, Gide, he was like not a part, he was not into that, but he was, I think, like, I don't know what his falling out with Paul Verlaine was about, but I think it was like, no, he didn't have, I don't know if it wasn't as dramatic as falling out, but I think he had some disagreements, like, it could have been pretty minor, honestly. But, yeah, I don't want to inform you guys, but, this is why history is not my major, but I still liked it nonetheless. It was, he went a long thing about, not only Verlaine, but, Thomas Mann too. Like he talked about Thomas Mann's, kind of. I don't know if he met him too, but he talked about how. I wouldn't think Dr. Faustus came out around that time, but that would have been pretty interesting to hear Gide, because I think that was a. I don't think that actually came out to the 50s. I think to like after the war, because Mann spent so much time kind of perfecting it, until he felt it was adequate enough. And he was out, by this time, as Gide notes, he was out in America and California, I think, just like getting away from everything Germany, and he was just like, he said he was like praising Mann's kind of reaction to that kind of, that he was saying like his stolid kind of unwavering like moral probity in the face of that time. And it's like, well, it was very easy to be seduced by the spirit of nationalism, and into kind of, even as I like to get through the Schnuffwaffle people, with Christopher Browning wrote Ordinary Men, which is a really great book, history, book about the terrors of a lot of what the SS did weren't by trained, inculcated, like inveterate, long-standing, like go-to SS, like Hitler, like for the Third Reich, they didn't even know about like the whole. They weren't privy, nor were they really care all that much. They were just ordinary, average kind of Joes who were thrown in this situation of having to expurgate, basically extinguish these ghettos, and they had to do so. And a lot of them were really sick to their stomach, and they didn't really want to do it. But it was just came down to the anonymity of it. Like they were like, hey, we're just gonna have to get this over with. And it brings me to kind of think about the Darren Brown, the whole, I think it was called Making an Assassin, I think there was one of them. It was like, I think it was called The Push. Yeah, that was one of my favorites. When he, it's called the foot in the door kind of thing, where he's like, if you put your foot in the door, if you kind of get somebody while they're impressionable and you kind of create this weird kind of bond with them, that would actually make them more, instill some kind of weird psychological thing where they're attracted to. If you create that along with anonymity, you're not going to be, listen, if you just do this one thing, you're not going to be a part of, you're not ever going to hear from us again. Nobody's ever going to hear about it. Your name's protected. Just like with the Milgram, experiment as well. But anyway, going back to the story. It was a very pleasant account that he had, that Gide had, of all his writer friends. And especially, I think he was saying that, I think he mentioned Marcel Schwab, who Better Than Food book reviews. He did a review on him that I really liked. Marcel Schwab, I think, and he was a French symbolist. And French symbolism, I'm still trying to pinpoint, but I think there was different varieties. There's German symbolism, French, Russian symbolism, I think, which I'm not quite sure I fully understand what it is yet. But I did like that he kind of met with these people. He actually was. He saw enough, lived enough life that he was actually able to see and interact with all these people. Because it's one of those things where you literally have to be there to see what they're talking about, to understand. Kind of like with the Beat Generation, it's that kind of, hunger and appetite for creativity, and it's you kind of have to. It kind of makes me think about now. It's what's the new thing? Where are the people going at now? Are they bohemian circles that are where people are rejecting of kind of the 9 to 5, and they are just in circles, or is it a lot more complicated, or maybe it's a mix? Maybe it's the people who are still working jobs they hate, but are just kind of reorientating and doing the best with what they have. So, but yeah, whatever it is, it's I think it's interesting, the time and the setting of these different writers, because a lot of them you can have such an immense effect on you, and it's been hundreds of years. I think it's something as simple as even though I've had some trouble with the Greek tragedies and stuff by Sophocles, Oedipus Rex or Antigone, I do, or anything else like the Oreston trilogy, I think, and the kind of other kind of things in between the other things that I've read kind of speckled throughout the years. I do find there's hearing Plato, for example, or Homer, his any elegiac, or I think poets or anything like that. I think a lot of them have had you feel like you're still talking to a human being. It's that died 2, 3. I think Homer was a good, even before that, a good 4,000 BC. I think, I'm not sure. It's it was or he was a good. I'm sorry, not 4,000, but he was a good. I'm sorry, I'm mixing up. This is why I don't do history. But yeah, Plato was and all these Greek thinkers. You think about how long ago they lived and how much of an impact they've had, or you think about how much somebody just in the present day, somebody. I mean, off the top of my head, it's hard to choose, but maybe someone like Don DeLillo is kind of maybe of that day, or Thomas Pynchon. They're still both alive, I hope. But yeah, it's and Cormac McCarthy recently passed a few months ago. 6 months ago at this point. But yeah, I think they're kind of, there's definitely it all depends on the kind of spirit of the author themselves, like, on the impact they've created. So yeah, that's all I have for Andre Gide, and stay tuned for the next episode.